In my last video, we explored the themes and ideas of the original Dark Crystal, going into what makes this film so memorable and poignant after more than 30 years. But one thing I have taken away from the Dark Crystal is that the expanded universe is so much bigger than anything we've seen from the movie. That was a very contained, character-driven story, with only 5 main characters if you count Jen, Kira, Aughra, the Emperor, and the Chamberlain. But the expanded universe explores the history, legends, culture, and wealth of knowledge from the land of Thra, and we have very little indication of time and setting in the Netflix show before it begins. All of this could be essential to understanding Age of Resistance. So join me in this video as we examine the expanded universe of the Dark Crystal, mainly drawing from the comic series Creation Myths by Brian Froud, and show you everything you need to know about Thra before the crystal cracked. The history of Thra is divided into 3 separate periods: the Age of Innocence, the Age of Harmony, and the Age of Division. Thra is an alien planet, orbited by 3 suns: the Greater Sun, the Rose Sun, and the Dying Sun. The Great Crystal was described as the beating heart of Thra, with a link to all living creatures. The first major historical event was when Aughra was born from Thra. The sources describe how when Thra first came into being, the stones had no tongues and longed to speak, the forests had no eyes and longed to see, so Aughra was born from their stones and roots. Aughra was born mother and child of Thra, goddess and guardian of the world, and when considering her goat-like form and huge horns, her design is evocative of the Greek god Pan, the god of nature, the wild, and shepherd of the nymphs. Aughra can be considered a goddess of the wild, as she gives names and communicates with everything in the forest, and shepherds the race of gelflings, as she taught them to plant and how to harvest, that the world was beautiful and not always safe. Once the gelflings had developed enough to create their own civilization, Aughra turned her attention skyward and tracked the movements of the planets and the stars, and began to make her predictions about the future. She predicted the first Great Conjunction, where the Greater Sun, the Rose Sun, and the Dying Sun all converged at a single point. The sources describe how, at this hour of the Great Conjunction, the crystal sang out, and the star beings opened a door in the light and stepped across the cold void of space. This was how the 18 Skeksis inhabited Thra. The Skeksis were what the Skeksis and the Mystics were born from, a race of luminescent celestial beings sharing a collective consciousness. They came from a world similar to Thra, with a similar crystal. However, the 18 were declared impure heretics for trying to use the crystal to gain power, and were exiled from their home world by the collective species. When they teleported to Thra, Aughra was blinded by the light of the Skeksis, but they healed her and restored sight to one of her eyes. In return for her knowledge and teachings, the Skeksis built the Great Observatory for Aughra, where she used her telescopes to make predictions of the future. The Skeksis began spreading their influence across Thra. They built a castle out of the shards of lesser crystal to house the Great Crystal, and they also brought essential knowledge to the Gelfling people, with gifts of culture, knowledge, and enlightenment, gave them tools and craft lore, and showed them how nature could be humbled and the world could be civilized. The Gelflings grew to populate Thra in an immense trading civilization of many tribes, and the Skeksis were considered benevolent leaders, beginning the Age of Harmony. However, some were mistrustful of the Skeksis. Near the time of the Second Great Conjunction, Aughra's adopted son Rayonip began to doubt the Skeksis of being indifferent to having power over Thra, and tried to instigate a civil war against them. Therefore, the Skeksis sent delegates to the Gelflings and the Podlings to be present at the next conjunction, as they wanted to explain their motivations. At the time of the first conjunction, the 18 were cast out from their home world for having conflicting natures, able to process both good and evil. Therefore they were seen as outcasts. Now, after 999 and 1 trine since their arrival, the Skeksis intended to trap the light of the Great Conjunction in the crystal and use it to purify imperfections in their souls, so they could return to their home world. The plan was in motion. However, one of the Gelflings they had invited, a musician named Gia, played an Skeksis song he had heard while on a long sea voyage. One of the Skeksis was consumed by nostalgia, allowing himself to give in and be corrupted by his darker nature. When the conjunction occurred, the crystal sensed the imbalance within the collective and rejected the corrupted one, and in the wake of the Great Light, where once floated the Skeksis, 2 new species crawled and staggered. This was the origin for the Skeksis and the Uru. In the battle that followed, a Skeksis attacked Aughra and struck the Great Crystal, causing a small shard to fall into the chasm below. At this point, earthquakes shook the ground and the castle sank as the wounded crystal became the Dark Crystal. The Age of Harmony was over. Rayonip and Aughra spent years in the chambers below the Crystal Palace, searching for the lost shard in a sea of crystal shavings. This is why Aughra had a collection of crystal shards in her observatory. She didn't know how to tell the right one from the others. The genocide of the Gelflings did not begin immediately. The Skeksis allied with the Gelfling population, calling themselves ambassadors of the crystal. The first emperor, Skekso, attempted to weaponize the usually peaceful Gelflings as a fighting force against the Makrats, a race of unknown beings forced from their home under the castle when the crystal cracked and let in the light above. Their intentions were to use the Gelflings as cannon fodder, then the Skeksis would completely dominate the remaining much-cowed population. The Mystics and Rayonip stepped in to avoid the slaughter, and Rayonip led the Makrats to a place of peace, leaving Aughra behind to guard the crystal shard. He was never seen or heard from again. The Mystics stayed in their Valley of Stones, determined to live a life of peace separate from the conflicts, and the Skeksis kept dominion over the Gelflings from their home in the Crystal Castle. There is further history from the other adaptations that we can discuss, but I'm leaving it out of this video. From the teasers we've been given, I'm assuming the show will cover that history, the events after the war with the Makrats, and focus on the repercussions of the Gelfling prophecy when it was made. I'm assuming the climax of the series will be the war that wiped out the Gelflings, as we see several shots of the unification of the Gelfling clans and the Gelfling armies. I find this incredibly ironic, as we have already learnt that the only reason the Gelflings are able to make war is because the Skeksis militarized the race. So technically, the Age of Resistance was funded and enabled by the Skeksis. What is interesting is that even though we see Aughra playing a pivotal role in this teaser, we see hardly any of the Uru. Even though there were peacemakers in the conflict with the Makrats, maybe the Mystics specifically didn't involve themselves in the Gelfling wars. The trailer has also alluded to a process called the Darkening. Considering the original movie's focus on naturalism, I'm assuming this will refer to the Skeksis using the crystal to artificially extend their lifespans, while destroying the land and creatures of Thra. The world was already a deserted apocalyptic landscape when the film opened, and considering the lush greenery shown in the TV series, we will probably see the events that led up to this natural carnage. From the shots of the Dark Crystal in the trailers, and the fact that Mark Hamill is playing a prominent role as the scientist Skektek, I'm assuming the series will focus on how the Skeksis began to experiment with the crystal, using its power to drain off the essence of living beings. Whatever my theories amount to in this video, we won't have long to wait, as the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance comes out on Netflix on November 30th. Thank you very much for watching part 2 of this video. I had such fun making this 2-parter series, and of course when Age of Resistance comes out, I'll be making a mini review of the Netflix show, and so please subscribe to see my upcoming videos. Thank you again for watching, and I shall see you across time and space in the next video.